Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about prayer lists or prayer pages. I know that when I show my war binder, I always skip these pages, and that's because usually if there's anything worth seeing, like in terms of the layout and things like that, there's also prayers written there. And a lot of times I mix my own personal prayers in there with other people's prayers, and while I don't really put like last names or anything like that, if people I know are watching the videos, then they would recognize other people they know. And it's just not right to put other people's personal business out, on YouTube. So I did want to take some time to show you some examples of how I set up my prayer list, talk about what I include in them and things like that in this series on types of pages that I include in my war binder. And so since I can't show you my actual prayer pages, I took some scrap paper and started doing some doodling here. So it's not super intricate or super complicated, and you don't have to make it super intricate or complicated. You can dress these up however you would like, or leave them simple, or even dress them down. So first, I want to talk about some of the components that I include. You don't have to include all four of the things that I list, but this is typically what I will include, and that is the name of the person that I'm praying for, or myself, or like the institution that I'm praying for, what it is that I'm praying for, the date that I began praying for it, and if it's applicable, the date that that prayer was fulfilled. Now, one of the major reasons that I use prayer lists is because oftentimes people tell me to pray for things and I forget. Sometimes it's, like sometimes I pray right then when the person is talking, but sometimes it's, like, oh, I have a test in, 3 weeks. Can you pray for me? And I like totally forget that they have a test in 3 weeks because I'm thinking about other things. Also, I like to, it also helps me remember like people that I'm supposed to check on. I know that sounds a little crazy. Like, yes, it's there for prayer purposes, and, sometimes before I pray, I'll glance at the list to remember who I'm praying for and why I should be praying for them. But also sometimes, like, if someone has told me that they're having a rough time or a hard time with something or a death in the family, and they're not necessarily super close to me, it's something that I can see and remember, like, oh, I should go back and talk to them. And to be honest, the bulk of the prayers that I end up writing here are not prayers that someone specifically asked me to pray for them, but things that I may have noticed. For instance, maybe I've noticed something about my coworker, or my coworker said something in passing, and I'm like, I should pray for that for them. Like, for instance, I had a coworker that was house hunting, so I added praying for their search to my list. And so things like that, just making sure that it gives me a place to sit down and think about other people, though I do include prayers for myself here as well. And I think it's, I don't know, it's just something that I include. And one of the things that I really liked was adding this date fulfilled versus the date that I prayed. Sometimes I just do a check mark, and sometimes I put an actual date. It's very interesting because, sometimes I will get to the end of the journal and I'll be able to see where, I was praying for XYZ and these things came true, and I can see, how long it took. Now, one thing that I will say that kind of sucks is because I go through notebooks so fast, prayers that come to fruition, longer, more than like a year, maybe even more than like 7 or 8 months. I've already moved on to a new journal, and I don't always remember to go back and look at those prayer lists and be like, oh wow, this fulfilled this prayer. Like, I'm pretty sure that in one of the first war binders I ever did, I had a list where I was praying for, a place where I could have like a garden and all of that. And that was fulfilled now in 2022. But I made that war binder probably back in like 2018 or something. Um, And, ideally, I would go back and find that line and write 2022 in it, but I don't always do that. So a lot of them are blank, even though that prayer was fulfilled. But in theory, as I would go back and look through them, I would be able to see that it was fulfilled. If I like to see the time for the sake of reminding myself that sometimes God fulfills things instantly and sometimes you have to wait. So it's nice to see the time lapse, but it's not necessary. You can always do a check mark here. In this example that I'm currently drawing, this is one of my favorite layouts. I'll talk about it in a second, but I just wrote it over to the side where I would write the date out. You can also, especially if you're going to do a check mark, you could just indent as I've done here and put a check box to the left, which would also be fine. It's however you think to design it. This is my favorite layout because it's the easiest to maintain. Usually what I will do is just write the headings across the top, and as I go, I will write in any requests that come. If the request takes more than a line, I'll just wrap it around. And then what I do is when I create the next row, I usually do alternating rows with highlighters to, help me read it and make sure it stays like neat. I will say I would not recommend this blue highlighter that I'm using in the video because it's a little dark. Um, I have a couple different types of highlighters, but I have a set of pastel highlighters. I have the mild liners, which are, I guess, sort of pastel, but I have an actual set of Bic pastel highlighters, and they work really well for this to keep everything kind of soft so that you can actually see the text on top of it. Or you can use a thicker weight pen or a darker pen. It's really just up to you and how you like to see things. And like I said, you can jazz it up or you can, tone it down a little bit. Another layout that I have played with is a grid layout. I like the grid layout, though I feel like it's a little more limiting, and usually I only use the grid layout when I create a new prayer page for every month. And to be honest, I go back and forth with which one I prefer, whether I like, one singular prayer page that I go until I run out of space on the page, or whether I like to redo it each month and be able to see, what was going on each month. But basically, when I create these, in this example, I'm making the boxes very, very small because it's an example and I'm not actually going to write prayers in here. But usually I will take up the entire page and I will, count the boxes across, count the boxes down, and I will divide it so that I can do a 3 by 3 square of boxes. So in this case, because of the number of rows that I have, there's like 13 across for each box. And then inside the box, I will write a particular category. And so I have like a family category, a friend category, a coworker category, and I just write the prayers for my family members in the family box, the prayers for the friends in the friend box, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a couple of ways. You could do a box and put the heading inside the box, like stylistically, and then just write the prayers under it and not have the prayers inside the box. Sometimes I put the prayers inside the box, which means, of course, the box is longer. And then typically there, I don't add quite as much info. Like I said, this is usually when I'm doing monthly prayers, so I don't typically add the date. And if I do a fulfilled status, I will just use a check mark. And so, it has to be a little bit more compact because you have less space. The things that I like about it is that it's just broken up. Like I don't know, visually, I think it's a little bit more aesthetic because it's not just like a list. I think the other one reminds me of like a spreadsheet, and like I don't know, like an accounting spreadsheet or something. But with this one, I don't always have the same amount of prayers for family or friends or coworkers or society or, myself. You'll see all of the categories that I typically put in here as I finish up this example. And so, like, if I have a ton of prayers for my family and not as many for my friends, and, you know, it becomes a little weird because you're kind of guessing up front how much space you will need for this. And again, like I said, this is why I typically use it only for monthly layouts, because over the year, I might have, a page full of prayers for my friends and family, particularly because I talk to them more, and I may only have like 2 prayers for strangers or for coworkers or something like that. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. And of course, you're cramming things in, and those are some of the things that I don't necessarily like. Of course, if you wanted more space and you wanted kind of this grid type of layout, you could do it across, like horizontally. So you could have, maybe the 3 on this page and then 3 on the next page, and then flip the page and do 3 that way, and you would have the entire column. In fact, as I'm saying that, that might actually be what I do for my new war binder. We're gonna see. I kind of like that idea now that I'm saying it out loud. That sounds kind of fun. I think I'm gonna try that out. But that is kind of one way to show, like, to write out the prayers and remember them. So, like I said, gonna experiment with this new version and see what I think about it. But I don't use this one as often. Like I said, I use the basic table the most. I had 2 other thoughts as I was coming through and doing these 2. I have never actually used either one of these ideas in practice, but I was trying to think of other ways that you could do a prayer list if you got bored of these, or if you just wanted something a little bit more creative. And I was thinking, at first I was like, oh, well, you could draw like a picture or something, and like you could put the prayers inside the picture. Maybe like you could have a flower, and each petal could be a prayer. And that's still something you could do, especially if you wanted to do something for, like gratitude prayers, or, personal prayers, or, actually writing out prayers. I know the original War Room movie and, a lot of war binders are where people actually write out their prayers. I typically just write short bullets for my prayers and keep the meat of the prayer as a conversation between me and God. But you could do some things like that, which would be interesting. I didn't show any examples of this here, but I also thought you could incorporate prayers with a calendar. There are 2 ways that I typically do calendar layouts if I'm going to do a calendar. And one is this kind of vertical thing where I put in the numbers. Sometimes I just do the numbers. A lot of times I'll add the day beside it. So I'll put like an S for Sunday, or, an M for Monday or whatever. So I know what day the first is, what day the second is, and things like that. And then off to the side, you could write, the prayer on the day that you get it, or even maybe in advance. Like in this example, my dad's birthday is the 15th. So I wrote off to the side of the 15th, pray for dad and his birthday. So that might be something that is of interest. Yeah, and then I tried to come up with like a little key, maybe like a exclamation point for like an event, or, something that's high priority, a, birthday gift for a birthday. I don't know. You could kind of dress it up a little bit. And then, each day that you receive a prayer request, or on the day of the prayer that you receive a prayer request, you could write the prayer request there. Or if like I said, in advance that you're going to need to pray for something on a particular day, you could do that. You might have trouble fitting in things. If you end up with multiple prayer requests per day, that might be a little cumbersome, a little cluttered. But I was just kind of playing around with what something like that might look like. And if you are into monthly things and bullet journaling, that might be something that you are interested in. I also wanted to play around with a grid calendar and seeing what that would look like. As I tried to draw a small calendar here, one that would fit within the space left on this piece of paper, I quickly realized that that might be a huge space constraint. Definitely because I made this calendar so small, you could not write anything in here and fit the date in. But if you were doing a full size calendar, you may at least be able to fit in a name. So if you remember the prayer, you could at least put, Jane Doe, and remember that you should pray for Jane Doe, or on Tuesday, Jane Doe asked you to pray for her. So that's one thing you could do if you want something a little bit less intense, a little less, I guess, specific. So I just wanted to play with that idea as well. I don't think I'm going to use any of those two calendar ideas anytime in the future, but I was trying to get as many options for you guys as possible. So yeah, this has been a brief overview of how I do prayer pages and prayer lists in my war binder. I hope that this has helped you. If you have more ideas or questions about it, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.